Welcome back to our podcast, Interpersonal Communication in the Workplace. This is a series of this is a series not of videos, but of recorded conversations that looks at interpersonal communication from different perspectives. Today, we're talking about the riveting world of accounting. How do we communicate complex numbers to an audience that may not understand? I have a guest here, Bryon Ownby, who is an accountant, works in accounting. Bryon, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a graduate of ETSU in Johnson City, Tennessee, where I got my BBA in accounting. And I have been in accounting probably for on and off for 30 years now. Done anything from corporate accounting to public accounting in the area of audit and tax. I've done individual accounting for different type of organizations, from partnerships to sole proprietors to Fortune 500 companies as well.
Excellent. So when we're talking about complex information, let's say you are talking to a client or someone you're working with or working for, and what does audience-centered communication, what role does that play when you're taking complex numerical data to communicate to them in a way where they understand how to make decisions for their business?
That is, it's twofold. Part of it it's understanding your target audience and what comprehension level is available for them, and so it's going to vary based upon the audience that you're talking to. So, for myself in those type of roles. As an example, when I'm working with our production managers there, they're going to look at financial data very different than what the executive team is going to be looking at that I've worked with in the past. And so it's learning how to tailor what information do they need and what information is available to present. It also involves really having a list of questions to inquire as much information from those individuals that you can respond back to their inquiry with relevant data for what they're looking for, what they need. And so it's a two-way communication street that if someone comes to you with a need, it's going back to them. It's like, okay, let's start here, kind of a basic fundamental, and expand in the communication process.
Yep. So let me ask you this. When you're communicating this information and you're being audience-centered, what role does the other person's nonverbal communication play in how you continue to communicate to them about this important information?
Right. Looking at things at nonverbal, one is looking at their eyebrows and their facial expressions, because sometimes, if it's something that's totally not comprehensible by them, they're going to kind of give you a puzzled look, or they're going to kind of give you a weird face look that's not normal for them. I know that's if you know the person. If you don't know the person, just kind of look at their body. Are they still kind of have an open body presence with you, or do they seem firm and stiff or tight around that? And so it's looking at nonverbal communication, that scheme. Also looking at how much attention they're paying to you as you're talking, presenting to them. Are they, being distracted? Are they looking off somewhere? And so looking at those nonverbal communication cues is a good understanding of, are you on the same page with that individual, or need to back up and ask some more clarifying questions on the topic?
So even though they're not saying words to you, they're still communicating a message to you at all times during the conversation.
Oh, exactly.
Yep. I want to think about communicating news that may not be the news your stakeholder wants to hear. How do you prepare to go into a conversation where the numbers may not be where they want them to be? And so what do you do to prepare for that conversation?
Preparing for those tough, difficult conversations takes a little time to study the situation, as far as my preference, to step back and looking at. And where I'm at, we actually have an example of that situation. some prior financial data analysis that was done outside the company really gave some misleading information of some internal decisions that was made. With that, on a manufacturing project, they had spent probably $40,000-$50,000 on some machinery and brought in, thinking they could make the same process in-house versus utilizing an outside supplier. Well, when they started doing the testing and started looking at the cost, they realized some reason we're not able to produce this as cost effective as our outside supplier was. And so this analysis also was performed before I arrived into the role that I was at as an accounting, doing cost accounting work here. So what I had to do, I had to go back and look at what research was supplied before to try to have an understanding of where those numbers were based on, and go back and look at current data information that I have, and try to really look at the disconnect of what was not picked up before versus what we have now to look at. And then what I had prepared in addition to that was something in the financial world called break-even analysis, a cost break-even analysis of, okay, this is the rate that we're going to have to make this certain product to meet this certain cost level to even be comparable to what's going on from our outside supplier. And so that's the information that I take. For myself, trying to find something that's solid. In this case, it was the data from the research that I could present to say, hey, based upon this, the decision that was made probably was not the best decision. But another way to look at the decision, really not being a bad decision in this case, was also a risk assessment that if an outside supplier could not supply it, we actually have research to do something in-house, but we know that that is going to have to really have more in-depth if that's going to mitigate the risk as a company on that part. So, yes, I had to present information that said past data research was misleading, it was incorrect, but with that, I also provided options of one, how to look at the study, how to look at the decision that was made, and then provide an outline of if this is what we want to accomplish, then this is what we're going to have to look at doing decision-wise to move forward with the project to deem it as being successful.
Yeah, that the scenario you provided, thank you for sharing that with us. It really shows that communication is an ongoing and dynamic process. Even though you weren't there when those decisions were made, you were in an organizational system where you had to understand that your communication was building off of something else. That's something we talk about all the time in interpersonal communication, that you may be talking about a particular topic, but that topic has a history of conversations before you get to it that shapes how we believe that.
Exactly. And so before I held the meeting to present all this information, Josh, I actually stood back and looked at the 2 or 3 critical stakeholders that was on this matter and had personal interviews with them directly of saying, tell me how this works, show me how this works, help me understand where this came from, help me understand how you arrived at this decision. And so when you're, especially difficult information, it's really critical that you become a very active listener in those situations. And once you do that, the project lead was very apprehensive of the decision that was made and realizing that it was probably not the best decision to be made at the time. But after a couple meeting sessions around this, felt more comfortable that, okay, we can look at this as a different way. We can look at other options that are out there now. So it's learning to kind of put a different, I don't want to say the word spin, but it is in a way, around what's being presented, that, facts are facts. Sometimes they're not the best choices, best decisions, but also looking at things in a different perspective, because that's the key thing is It's about perspective in those situations.
Yeah, you really had to know your audience, understand them, listen to them uh, as you were talking with them. And I love the fact that you mentioned basic research skills that we've been using in interpersonal communication, and maybe students listen to this have used in other classes, that you're using those in a professional environment. So the goal of learning how to do research really isn't simply related to, oh, I'm going to write this paper, but there's practical applications for this in a professional setting as well. So thank you for providing that for us. If you could give someone, maybe an aspiring accountant or someone that wants to go into business, advice about interpersonal communication in the workplace, in a business environment, what advice would you give them?
Probably the best advice in communication is knowing yourself, knowing things that trigger you, think how you respond to people, how you behave with around people, those you agree or disagree with. I'm working on a current project with a company now, putting a little bit of a leadership program together to where we've learned that in order for us to move forward, we have to kind of know who we are ourselves. So as far as an accounting or even someone who wants to go into their own business, step back and really understand who you are, because once you understand who you are in situations, in my opinion, you can understand others so much in their situations. And communication to me is much more other centered when it comes into business in a way, kind of the customer service environment. And so that would probably be my one key thing is understanding who you are, your own dynamics, your own drives, and your own motives.
Yeah, that's so important. In our textbook and in class, we've talked about intrapersonal communication, communication with ourselves, and being able to know how we act as a communicator, how we exist as a communicator is so important. Bryon, thank you so much for joining us today as we are looking at interpersonal communication in the complex world of accounting.
Thank you so much, Josh, for having me.